Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane. I'm a wife, mom, and business owner. I also write at hollykane.org, where I focus on my passion for women's ministry.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Welcome to today's episode, and I am super excited to be here today with another Esther, Esther Inman. Hi, Esther. Welcome to the show.
Hello. How often does that happen?
Yeah, not very often. So Esther and I are here together. We're actually recording this episode in my hotel room because we are both here for an event in Connecticut. And let me just introduce you a little bit to Esther. Esther is another business owner that I have met through our online mastermind. And Esther quit her corporate America job 6 years ago when she realized it wasn't suitable for a military wife and mom life. She started working from home as a virtual assistant and couldn't believe this simple, low entry level virtual career was completely unknown by other military wives, moms, or travel lovers. She has been running her 6-figure online agency ever since and has her own team of over 8 virtual workers. She also runs online programs helping other women launch their virtual work life too. She actually lives right now in Bali with her 8-year-old son and her veteran husband. So I'm super excited to have you here today, Esther, and hear more about your journey and your leadership experience. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super pumped to be here too. It's a topic that is near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. So why don't you just get us started and just tell us a little bit more about you and your background and really kind of like your leadership journey.
Sure. It's funny because when I was in second grade, apparently I made this collage of me. They asked you what your career would be, and I made a collage of me as a teacher. And my dad had it laminated, and it was in my classroom when I graduated from school as a teacher. So I've known since second grade that I wanted to be a teacher. And so that kind of position, you're typically kind of more in a leadership role. So I've always been the leader on the group projects when I was in high school. And then I did theater, and I was always, I like to also say kind of like I like attention, but I don't shy away from being in the leadership role. It comes really, really naturally to me. And the older that I got, the more I realized that wasn't true for a lot of people. So it was something to embrace and something to stick with and move into. So I had always had leadership roles at church. I would always be on like the youth group staff, and I ran the children's ministry department for a while, and I was in my early 20s, like running this whole ministry.
Wow.
So that was always just really natural to me and really normal. So, and then I went to become a teacher, and I started traveling the world by myself, and just kind of have always been, that's just part of my personality and how God made me.
Yeah. And then when you started transitioned from corporate America to working from home, I mean, you ended up starting your own business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about how that happened and what that looked like for you.
So my corporate America roles, I did really well in corporate America, actually. I think because I'm a pretty strong female but I'm very approachable and cool. So I did very well in corporate America, and I actually really enjoyed it. I worked in software product management after I taught, and then I did software training. So I have a wide variety of experience. And it just, like you were saying, it didn't work with our lifestyle. So a lot of you can relate. Your kid is sick, especially if you're in America. Other countries are different. But if you're in America, your kid is sick, and being able to figure out how to take off that time was impossible. And then if you add that fun layer of having your husband be active duty and he's gone at the drop of a hat, you have no notice, and then he's gone for 3 months. So you're kind of like acting as a single mom. For years, like it's nonstop. So I had to figure out something else. And I think because I'm a problem solver, I basically just was crying in my hotel room every night because I had a travel job that I really enjoyed, but it just wasn't conducive to our lifestyle. And I was just crying in my hotel room every night. And finally, I don't tell a lot of people this story because it has to be the right people, but I heard God telling me, I got this, basically. You can quit your job and I'm going to take care of you. And he gave me this vision of adopting children from around the world and being this mom, and that it was going to be fine. So I quit my job the next day. I called in and I put in my 2 weeks notice, and I went home, and my husband and I didn't have a ton of savings, but he was super supportive. He said, if you feel like this is what you need to do, we're going to make it happen and it'll work. And so I knew that I could work from home, but I didn't know how.
Yeah.
And so I just was determined to figure it out. That was basically the answer.
And a lot of times that's what leaders do. We're very resourceful. And so we will decide, okay, I'm going to figure it out.
Yep. Figure it out.
Yeah. Okay. So just getting back to kind of your leadership journey, were there any other life events that you feel like contributed to you kind of stepping into or embracing your role as a leader throughout the years?
So the probably most traumatic things that happened were shortly after that, when my husband, so he was deployed right around then, when he got home right before I quit my job. And then I quit my job and he was home, and he started having these really bizarre psychosomatic symptoms. So I guess the best way to describe it was, all of a sudden your partner is like this person that you married. And then slowly over the course of a year or two, they're having these crazy nightmares every night, and they're not sleeping at all.
Yeah.
And they're starting to see things, and they're starting to hear things. And then it got worse and worse. And then we're starting to think that the neighbors are following us. And then we're starting to get paranoid. And so I didn't know what was going on. They don't tell military spouses that, hey, this is a traumatic brain injury, and that's what happens.
Yeah.
And it's quite common. PTSD or TBI, traumatic brain injury. Those are both very, very common, people coming out of the military. And I didn't know that what my husband was experiencing was textbook symptoms. I had no idea. The person that I knew and loved and married was not the person that I had married anymore.
Yeah.
And they put him on lots. This is another issue, unfortunately, with the VA, is you don't have the best quality of care. So they're putting him on different medications that are having bad interactions with each other. And so his symptoms got actually worse and worse and worse until they finally got it right. And he did eventually get better. But at the time, it was so bad that he was self-medicating and with not good choices. And my son and I actually had to leave.
Yeah.
So we had to move out of our house because he couldn't work anymore. My car got repossessed. Thank God I had my online business, truly thank God, because it was able to sustain us. He didn't have any disability or anything that had kicked in yet. That takes months to have happen.
Yeah.
So my son and I had to leave, and that was a big decision that I had to make. And it was really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
But basically his therapist and my therapist were both like, okay, this isn't healthy anymore, or a safe environment. You need to go. So we left, and that kind of started me and my son's adventure, because I feel like I really stepped into a role that I was not prepared for. But God really told me we can either make this a sad situation, and it was still sad, or we can turn this into a grand adventure. What if this is a grand adventure for you? And we don't know what's going to happen with your husband. And I had to trust that he was either going to be fine on his own and we were going to be fine separate, or maybe someday we would get back together. I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know. And we turned it into a grand adventure. And that's when my son and I started traveling the world.
Wow. Yeah. So what has happened since then? What has been the journey since then? And how long ago was that where you had to make that choice to step away?
I would say 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
So since then, oh my gosh, this is like one of those classic stories where you trust God and you take these really, really hard steps. Like leaving your husband when you love him is the hardest thing ever. And it goes against everything you're taught in church and everything you're taught by your family and culture and everything. And it was so, so hard. I did not know that if I did the right thing or not. Yeah. That's why I think I had to have my therapist's permission of it's not safe anymore and you have to go.
Yeah.
So making that decision was really, really hard. But that's the best part of this story. I was so depressed. I personally became pretty suicidal and started drinking every single night to try to deal with it. I moved to Maine to live with my brother for a while. I didn't realize what was happening, to be honest. Like, I didn't realize that I went to Maine to have a healing time and relax with my family and let them take care of me. But that's what happened. And Maine is a great place to go.
It is. I'm certainly partial to it. It
is.
At least during the summer months.
I was in the winter, but even then it was magical. Like, it was just nice to be somewhere that was different from a really toxic environment that my home life had been.
Right.
And so I ended up having my biggest months in business. Those were my months that I first hit 10K in my business, was the months that I was living in like a studio apartment paid by the week, trying to get my life back together.
Yeah. Wow.
It was those months from my little bed that my son was sleeping on a crib mattress on the floor. That's what happened, because I had to dig deep and I had to be a problem solver, and I had to figure it out. How am I going to feed this baby? How am I going to, he wasn't a baby, but he's my baby. He was 6 at the time. How am I going to keep him fed? How am I going to keep him in school? How am I going to, figure this out? And, every day I would have prayer and quiet time, and every day God encouraged me, just keep going. Just keep going. We're going to do this. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. I promise, baby, you keep going. And that's how it turned out. And then I got the opportunity to go to Bali.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So when I read your bio, it said you're living there with your husband. So is he there with you now?
So the end of the story, I guess, it's not really the end, but like, the ellipsis, I guess, is right around when I moved to Maine. No, when I moved to Bali, my husband started to get better. He started to, so TBI symptoms, typically you're never really going to be better. Like, you're going to have these issues forever, but they got his medication right.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal. And so they finally got his medication right, and he started to take ownership of his healing process and going to yoga and starting to reconnect with God and going to therapy and choosing to do better things with his time than playing video games and self-medicating with a variety of not healthy choices.
Yeah.
And so I saw that, and I did not want to give him a chance. But my friend, a couple of my key friends and family, they said, this is like, he could be better. Doesn't have to be the end.
Yeah.
Give him a chance. And so I did. And he ended up moving out to Bali, and I tried to take it slow at first. And then he's been there with me ever since. And we've been traveling the world together as a family ever since.
Wow. And it's encouraging just to hear how God has been doing the healing work. It sounds like for both of you, that had to be a really difficult experience for you.
It was horrible.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that helped you personally get through that? Because I think when you go through a traumatic experience like that, you're doing a lot of self-leadership, right? You have to make choices that are going to help you heal, or else you're going to just end up wallowing forever too. So what were some of the things that helped you to move forward through that experience?
I would say it's kind of the classic things that people would tell you, but you actually really have to intentionally do them. Because especially if you are susceptible to depression like I am, but even most people are, if you're going through something so traumatic and difficult, it's quite normal. But you're going to want to stay in bed all day and not want to do anything. And so to fight that, you have to get outside and walk around in the fresh air. It doesn't matter how cold it is in Maine. I got out and took a walk every day, no matter how much I didn't want to, except for during the snowstorms. You can't sleep all the time. So having just certain sleeping hours, intentionally spending time with family and friends that's not drinking and that's not partying, because that feels good, right? That's self-soothing. But choosing to, wondering, do drinks normal? Fine. But choosing to have fulfilling experiences in your life that are going to bring you joy. Even if you don't feel like it. There was times when I would take my kid to the trampoline park and I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I want to stay in bed all day, but I'm going to get up, I'm going to go, and I'm going to have time. And then I had a quiet time with God every single day. That, going through some of the hardest times, but I had such a closeness with the Lord. And sometimes that's the best part of going through a hard time, as horrible as it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I did journaling every day, and I tried to read devotionals every day. I read Jesus Calling, which really spoke to my heart during that time. And I would go to a cafe and just sit and just have time with God every day for about an hour. Yeah. And that's what got me through it.
Yeah. So you just kind of created a routine that would help you just get through each day.
Yes. Literally, it was just to get through that day.
Right.
Because I didn't want to do this anymore. Like I didn't want to anymore. And the other thing too is like the other important thing that's important. I don't think people talk about the ugly parts of marriage enough, especially in the Christian community, which is why I'm so vocal about it, and the aspect of mental health and the role that it can play. So coming back together isn't always for everybody. Number one, it was our story. But one part that I haven't ever talked about, but it took like probably a full year before I really felt intimate with my husband again. I held back a lot. I had a very hard time because he'd lost all my trust. I had tried to stop loving him because it was too hard and I thought we were going to get divorced. So even now I'll still find myself being like, oh, I have a hard time telling him I love him now. Yeah. And it's still a journey. And I think that hearing that, like marriage is going to be really hard sometimes and it's really ugly. And that's okay. Like that's part of that relationship. And like I said, not getting back together isn't necessarily for everybody, but it might take some time for that healing to happen. Yeah. It's taken us time. We're still going through it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about marriage a little bit on this podcast before, and my husband and I shared a bit of our story, and not the same at all, but marriage is hard. I mean,
it really is.
I think it's hard for people in different phases, and for not everybody. I think it's harder for some couples than others based on their personality types and their upbringing and just and like you said, like your husband was in the military, and that experience, that injury really affected you dramatically.
Yes.
And if someone hasn't experienced that, it's probably going to be hard for them to understand that you had to make that choice. But it's just encouraging to hear you share openly about it and to know that God has brought you back together. So I love that. So let's talk a little bit about just how you have grown your business and some of the things that you've done to be able to go from a VA working in your hotel room or working, in your brother's, or the studio apartment in Maine. Like, what are some of the steps that you've taken in the leadership steps that you've had to take to grow, to have a team and get to the point where you are now?
I think the biggest decision, I had to decide what I really wanted. That was a big part of it. Because when you're a virtual assistant, you're just taking tasks from multiple clients, which is great. And I loved it. And when I first started, I quit I think I was making $65K a year, and I quit to make like $20 an hour working from home, but I didn't care because I was working from home.
Yeah.
I was so happy. And but as the time went on, I had to decide, okay, well, do I want to keep working one-on-one with clients and doing tasks that are given to me? Or do I want to step more into a management role and train and equip a team? And that's not really for everybody. But if you're listening to this, that's probably you.
Yeah, right.
You're one of us. Yeah. And so part of that was just deciding. And then the next part of it was learning how to do that, because it's not really that clear.
Right.
I think even if you go get an MBA, it's not clear because online business is always new, always changing. And so learning kind of just how to grow a team and develop processes and what I wanted my business to look like. I just kind of had to figure that out. And it just took journaling and mapping it out and praying about it too. And really asking God, how do you want me to spend my time? What do you want my day to look like? What do you want my legacy to be? So that shifted into running my agency, which was lovely. I enjoyed it, but I got tired of client work. And so the next phase, I think it's important to say that none of the things that were in this process were wrong. They were all just part of the journey.
And like you said, it was a phase.
Correct.
And I think, and we've talked about this on other episodes too, but people look at someone at their current phase and they don't always acknowledge that there were like 6 phases before that that brought them to the point where they are now.
Exactly. So we went from virtual assistant to a leadership role of an agency, which was fab, running a team like we mentioned. And then I was kind of just teaching women how to be virtual assistants on the side. And I never thought I could really do it full time. It was just a fun passion project. And so I was challenged by my mentors in my community of, Esther, yes, you can do this full time, but you're going to have to step into the spotlight a bit. And so that was the next process. That's the next phase of, again, praying about it. And God, is this what I want to be doing? Is this what you want me to be doing? What's the next thing for me? And so that was the next phase. I actually take very few clients now from my agency. It's mostly just consulting, unless they want to pay me a lot because I enjoy my coursework so much more.
Yeah.
And when I stepped into that business also makes me actually over 6 figures now. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like neither of those choices were bad. Right. It was just part of the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So let's talk about just with your coursework and what you do for training. Do you still have a team that works under you that helps okay. So can you just talk to me about like what that looks like and maybe just an example of day-to-day life for you as a leader? Because I think if someone is sitting here and they're like, that sounds interesting, they just might not know what a typical
what that even looks like. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. So it's actually very similar to when I ran the agency. So the example that I will give of day-to-day is very similar to both. It's just one's working on other clients. And then in this situation now, I'm the client, which is weird. That was a weird transition, by the way. Because I was like, oh, let's work on my course. Okay.
Right.
So I have a COO. And she started as a project manager and she's grown into a COO role. She's amazing. Mm-hmm. I have and all of them are contractors. Mm-hmm. And we basically I prepay them retainers at the beginning of each month. And it's based on like about how much they want to work and how much it needs for them to get the job done. That's basically it. We kind of just agreed upon it. And then about every 3 to 6 months, usually it'll increase, which aligns with my business making more money. So it's usually always works out, right? And I have a CFO. She's much less on like hands on deck than my COO, but that's like one of the best hires. Mm-hmm. By the way, hiring both those people was terrifying. They were both my first hires, and I was like, "Oh my god, I gotta pay your retainer each month. How am I gonna do that?"
Yes, yeah,
and it was the best decision ever. And then I have a web developer. He is on a small retainer, but then we do like project-based stuff. So if I'm going to develop a new sales funnel for a new product that we're going to sell, I'll kind of consult with him because that's beyond his normal set of hours each month. And then I have I have 2 graphic designers because they're both really busy. And I'll say, hey, I need a new workbook done. Here's the questions that's going to go along with this online class. Can you put that together for me? And then I have kind of a customer service / VA, and she's from my program. Actually, a lot of people on my team are graduates from my program. We try to hire within the family.
Yeah.
And she's my newest hire. She's awesome. Small retainer again. And she answers emails, like help emails that come in, things that come into the chat that people need help with, questions they have about the program. She does all our Facebook posts, our group call reminders, like just a lot of the admin stuff that my COO doesn't really need to be doing.
Yeah.
And then that's it. It's pretty much, it's not a huge team.
Yeah. So you are basically giving them like assigning what they need to do or like casting the vision.
Yeah. So like every quarter we'll get together and this is new. Okay. So like I'm telling you this and I've only been doing it for 6 months. So FYI, online business owners, even though I've been doing this for many years, we have no idea what we're doing. We're just making it up as we go along.
It's one of my favorite mottos. I'm just making this up as I go.
Yeah. But like it's working. So every quarter we do a little bit of a longer team meeting. Otherwise we have bi-weekly team meetings and we just meet on Zoom. Every quarter we have a little bit of a longer one. And I'll kind of say what our goals are for the next 3 months, what our plans are. It used to just be Esther coming up with ideas. And now it's like they were the ones that said, hey, Esther, you need to update some stuff in your course because we're getting emails that some stuff's outdated. So like it's becoming more of a group, which is great. And then I'll come in and say, hey, I've been talking with this potential collaboration and we're going to work on this. And so we do like a planning meeting together. And then after that, we use a project management tool, Asana. And my COO will kind of just take all of those ideas and calendar them out for us and put them into the project management tool and hold everybody responsible for their elements of that. So that's it, like a normal business, really, which is weird, but yeah.
Awesome. I love it. Okay. So part of leadership and part of our just personal growth, spiritual growth is understanding that God has made us uniquely and how we all have our different gifts and our skill sets. So I'd love to hear how you have understood yourself better. Are there any particular resources or tools that have helped you do that?
I do read a lot. I do like personality tests. So I haven't taken a lot lately, but I have taken a lot throughout the last few years of business. So that's a normal part is taking personality tests and seeing where your strengths are.
Yeah.
My next challenge is I actually think for my next kind of quarterly planning meeting, which is coming up for us, is having my team do them too, so I can know what theirs are as well.
Yeah.
And that we can all know each other's. I think that would be really good. One book that really helped me a lot, a lot of the books that helped me a lot are Brene Brown books. She has quite a few and they're all excellent. And a lot of them are about leadership and a lot of them are about knowing who you are and accepting who you are and working with it, basically.
Yeah, right.
And I think those two have been really, really helpful for me too.
Yeah.
And I just think that the more I can journal and reconnect with God every day, the more I can hear his voice talking to me, which keeps me aligned with who I am and the role I'm supposed to play. So the more intimate, and, trust me, this isn't every day or even every month. Our relationship with God goes in waves, right? But the times that I can really be who I'm supposed to be is the time when I can hear God guiding me.
Yeah.
And the only way I can do that is by connecting with him every day, however that looks to you.
Yeah.
So that would be, what, beyond any other books you can read.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I was just going to ask you about like how your faith has impacted your leadership. And basically you just answered that it's an intentional, ongoing connection with God.
Oh yeah.
And
sometimes I suck at it.
Yeah. I think if we're honest, most of us struggle with that, being consistent all the time. Right. But just like in any relationship, if you want to have that connection, you have to be intentional about it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so usually when I start to feel wonky and out of sorts and not aligned and not liking my business anymore or something, I'm like, well, have you been doing the way that I connect with God is daily journaling?
Yeah.
Have you been doing your journaling and reading? Oh, no, I haven't. Okay, well.
Maybe that's your next
step. And it always helps.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So I just love encouraging women to embrace their gifts and lead with confidence. So I would love to hear what you feel is one of your gifts and how you use that gift.
My gift is hands down education. That's obviously what I went to school for and what I mentioned before. I always knew I wanted to be.
Yeah.
But the gift around education is actually pretty specific. I've realized later it's a few things. It's being able to take concepts that are complicated and new and being able to break them down into steps and being able to explain them to somebody as if they've never heard them for the first time. And being able to turn that into curriculum or turn that into a course. I didn't know that was like my superpower. I thought anybody could do that. But then that's why my agency was so successful, was because clients were like, you can make curriculum, you can make a workbook. Oh my gosh. So yeah. And then I think the other part of being an educator that is another really big strength is endless patience. Because I can explain the same thing over and over again to different learners that have come through my course. You guys have been running the same course for years. So I get the same questions all the time. And I rarely ever get annoyed. I'm more like, oh yeah, okay, here you go. And other team members who are not in a customer facing role, because of this reason, they'll be like, how do you have this patience? This person's an idiot. They didn't look at this thing. Or, how do you answer it? I'm like, what do you mean? It's fine. It's their first time looking at it or whatever. So, there's obviously more to being an educator, but that is a big strength of mine. And I think those are two elements that really make it up.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. That's awesome. So what about leading with confidence? What does that look like to you? Or what does that mean to you?
I think that for me, I tend to doubt myself and what I have to say is valuable and that I know what I'm talking about. And so it's come up a lot in business where I would have issues with clients because they would be asking me for my professional opinion and I wouldn't give it to them. I would basically say to them what I knew they wanted to hear. And it was biting me in the butt. And I actually had a mentor tell me, you have to stop doing that. You're pissing off the clients. Stop just agreeing with them. They're paying you because they want your expertise. So being a strong, confident woman is owning your expertise and owning that you know what you're talking about. And I do have something valid and quality to contribute. And I'm not afraid if it's been said before, or if that one person thinks it might be kind of dumb, or someone already, it doesn't matter. And that comes up, I seem confident, I'm always on video and I do a lot, but I have those issues, especially if I'm in a room our business event is a perfect example. You're in a room with a bunch of smart people, or you're on a call with really smart people, and you're just so tempted to be like, I don't have anything good to say.
Yeah.
I'll just be quiet. So pushing through that has been a challenge for me.
Yeah. I think that's a common experience for women, even women in higher leadership roles, right? Any thoughts on why we struggle with that? Why we deal with this issue?
I wonder if it's a cultural thing and how women have been not in positions of leadership or authority for a very long time, centuries. Yeah. So, of course, we're going to doubt ourselves because we rarely see women that are speaking out and are vocal. So I think it's probably cultural.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it sounds weird, but y'all will get it. Sometimes it's just like, that's Satan. Like, that's just kind of how he rolls. Yeah. And he knows that women probably have a weakness in that area. And so he's going to poke at it. And that's probably why it affects so many of us.
Yeah.
I can think of all kinds of universal issues that with women, especially. And I always think like, oh, that's probably just that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's like you said, like your mentor said to you, look, your client wants to know it, right? But you're still, so yes, there's the cultural factor, but yet even when we are asked, sometimes we still hold back, right? So for me, the idea is that we have to just get really, really comfortable with the fact that God loves me no matter what. And whether I say the right thing or the wrong thing or any of that, like that's not going to change my standing with him and really my standing with most people, because if that person doesn't like what I have to say, it doesn't really matter.
Yes. That's stuff that I've learned from Brene Brown too, is their opinion of me isn't really my problem.
Right. Right.
And that gives you permission to say what you have to say.
Right. Right. Awesome. Okay. So one more thing that I find a lot of our listeners and a lot of the women that I talk to have in common is that we are multi-passionate.
Yeah.
And so we have lots of ideas or lots of different, business paths we could take or career paths that we could take. Like you probably could have continued in corporate America and been very successful. You probably could have continued teaching and been successful. So what are some of your passions, and maybe tell me how you manage them in a way that you don't get totally swamped or overwhelmed with everything you're doing?
I always have a million ideas. I'm a classic entrepreneur. It's funny when people ask me what I do. My response is always, well, I'm an entrepreneur, so I do a lot of things.
Yeah.
How I manage it is, I think I set by setting goals. So when I'm setting goals, then when the ideas come up, whether they're good ideas or not, I can see if they align with those goals or not. And if they do not, then they go and we have just a big, huge list in Asana of all of Esther's crazy ideas, and they all just go in there and they can get blocked when we have, these quarterly meetings where we're planning stuff. Okay, well, maybe one of those things can come up then. So they don't get lost. Because that's, I think, our biggest fear is, well, if I don't act on it now, I'm going to forget and that's going to be lost. Yeah. So being able to kind of store them somewhere and being really clear about what those goals are and what you really want to be doing. Because then when stuff comes up and these awesome opportunities, if it's a yes or a no, or if it's a later.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I think what you just said in terms of what you really want to be doing. And you mentioned that earlier, that you had to really think about what you wanted.
Like literally, what do I want to spend my time doing during the day?
Yeah.
That is it. Like, that's the question. And I think that we confuse the question and make it different. Like, well, do I want to be in a leadership role or do I want to work in corporate America? Like, no. You're going to make it into what do you physically want to be doing during the day for the majority of the day?
Yes. Right.
And then let that guide you.
And sometimes we don't let ourselves go there.
I know.
Because it seems very unrealistic, right? Like maybe what I want to be doing is literally sitting on the beach in Bali and then maybe going back to my office and working for 2 hours.
Yeah, no, that seemed insane. That's why everybody, when I told them I was moving there, they thought I was crazy because this idea is just what?
Yeah, right. So I'm not saying to be like just completely unrealistic, but I think it's okay for us to take that time to dream and to think about what could life look like. And like you said, like you prayed, you journaled, you talked to God. And that path opened up for you. So,
and I think too that I don't know what the fear is, but well, I do know what the fear is. There's a lot of voices that come into your head when you start to dream. You can't do that. What about your husband? What about your kids? What's your mom going to say? What are your friends going to say? What are the people at church going to say? And then you have all these things that's, you can't do that. You're not good enough. So it's a lot of issues that you have to work through to allow you to even dream. So just know that once you start dreaming, it's all going to come up. I think the other part is, your dream isn't necessarily going to be that you're not going to work. Like, that's not really what the answer is. I love working.
Yeah.
I love what I do. I have to make myself take breaks and go to the beach.
Yeah.
And I live up the street. It's stupid. So that's more of what it is. Like, don't be afraid that that's what your conclusion is going to come to.
Yeah.
The conclusion often will come to, this is the things that I really enjoy doing. How can I make money from that?
Right.
That's basically it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've talked a lot about that here on the podcast, is like letting yourself acknowledge your gifts and strengths that you have, that God has given you. I think I talked about this on episode 10, where Holly and I talked about finding your purpose. And because that's a word that in the Christian space gets really used a lot, purpose and calling.
Right.
And like, there's this one thing that you're meant to do.
Yeah, that's cute. Haha.
And so really it's, for most of us, it's much more of this
Absolutely.
roller coaster ride, and then taking different paths until you figure out the things that light you up and the things that scare you, but you know that deep down inside are what God is asking you to do.
Oh, yeah. Or the things that light you up for a while, and then it's time to make a change because they're not really doing it for you anymore.
Right.
And now it's time to pivot and do something else.
Right.
So it's totally a journey. It's not just this one destination that we're trying to all get to.
Right. Yeah. I love it. So thinking about advice for a younger leader, you've had a very broad experience in your life, many experiences personally and professionally. If you were talking to a younger woman just starting out in her career or in her ministry, what would you tell her?
I would say to do the exercise that I mentioned before of allowing yourself to journal, dream, draw, whatever's going to work best for you, to really figure out what is the thing that I will enjoy to do during the day. And ask God to guide you during that time. Like, it can be a very spiritually heavy session. Nobody can bother you. This is like an hour that you got to do that, at least an hour alone. Actually, that's actually another really big tip, is setting boundaries with your family and friends. My son and husband know Mom has her quiet time in the morning, and they're not allowed to bother me. It's not like 4 hours, okay? It's like 30 to 45 minutes.
Right.
But that is a set thing, and they hold each other accountable. Oh, hey, well, don't bother Mom right now. Or, hey, buddy, Mom's having her quiet time. So that actually can really help, starting to set some boundaries like that and take care of yourself that way, so you can have the clarity to think about these kinds of things, because it's your life. It's literally the most important activity you could possibly be doing, is reconnecting with God and ensuring that you are doing the things that you're supposed to do. Right. And it's the one thing that we're like, I don't have time.
Yes.
So I would say that would be my biggest tip, is to spend some time doing that and then figure out the plan to make that happen. And it's not going to be like a 6-month plan. It might be a couple of years plan.
Yeah.
And God's going to keep giving you these really cool visions, and you're going to keep being like, well, that's crazy. And then it's going to happen years later, and you're like, never mind, it wasn't crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing when God does that, and you look back and you're like, wow, I didn't actually think that this is where I would be. Both sometimes good and bad, right? Like there's experiences that we've had that we never could have imagined that are horrible.
Yeah.
And then there's experiences that we never could have imagined that are amazing. And just God has a way of surprising us.
Yes.
So
yes. That's the word.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you would want to share with my audience that you feel like would be important for them to know about your journey, or just about them as leaders?
Yeah. So my story that I shared is hard for me to talk about it. You might have heard me choking up a little bit, and it's ugly. And the reason that I still share it, even though it's really hard for me, is because I want women like you to hear it and know that God sees you and He's walking with you. I'm like going to get emotional again because it's so important that you hear me. And He sees you and He's walking with you, and He can turn that ugly, ugly stuff into something beautiful. And so whether you're walking through it right now and you need to hear somebody telling you that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, or if you have something in your past that you are shameful about, or was ugly or you feel like is holding you back from this thing that you're supposed to do. I want you to hear that this horrible experience that happened, it destroyed my life. Like, that's the word for it. My life was totally destroyed. But the quote that I really like to say is, God weaves a masterpiece out of the threads of our despair. So whatever you're going through right now or that you did before, God can turn it into something that is absolutely beautiful and absolutely amazing and bigger than you ever thought would be possible. So just keep walking. That's really it.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you, Esther, for sharing that. It's so encouraging. And I do hope that if you're experiencing something difficult in your life today, that this conversation has been encouraging for you.
Yeah.
So, Esther, as we wrap up, my last question that I like to ask is, if there's something that you've been learning or reading or listening to lately that you think would be a great resource that people should check out and learn from.
Yeah. So I mentioned Brené Brown before, and the book that all her books are amazing, but I really encourage people to usually start with the gifts of imperfection. And that really ties in well with what I was talking about earlier, because it's all about that. It's all about using this stuff that you've gone through and these parts about yourself that you are not proud of and that you think are ugly. And it's how to weave that into your life to be this incredible person.
Yeah.
And self-acceptance. And that self-acceptance allows you to be such a stronger leader. Oh my gosh. It allows you to have more patience and understanding for people that you're managing, and or if you're in any kind of a educator or teacher while you're working with children or youth, it allows you to just change the dynamic entirely. And as a person leading with other people, really knowing yourself and knowing what your weaknesses are, what your strengths are, and that self-acceptance, man, like accepting how God made you and that you are awesome, and some parts of you aren't so great, and that's okay.
And that's why we need grace, right?
Exactly. Like the whole book is about grace.
It's so funny because we just read one of her books in my group Confident Leader Club, and it's just amazing. She doesn't really, I know she has faith, but she doesn't talk specifically about it. But so much of what she talks about is essentially biblical concepts just put in different words.
And I love it though, because she's blown up. And so she's becoming a voice that's not just those crazy Christian people talking.
Yeah.
She's becoming a voice for our culture and for women, that in all different kinds of areas of women, all different faiths, all different backgrounds, and really helping them to, come into really God's light and love and be able to take the steps of their purpose.
Yeah.
It's amazing to watch the shift that she's been able to make.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. We'll put the link to that book in the show notes for sure. So Esther, it always feels funny. I keep saying Esther, and I'm not talking to myself. Can you tell us where we can connect with you? What's the best place for people to connect with you? And of course, we'll have all the links in the show notes for you who are listening in the car driving. Don't try to write this down. So
it's really, really easy. It's esterinman.com. My last name is Inman. Super confusing. It's esterinman.com. And from there, it'll have more about me and links to my social media profiles. And it'll take you to my virtual assistant training. I have free resources on there if you want to work online. So it's kind of a one-stop shop.
Okay. Yeah. And we're definitely going to put a link to your information about the VA course that you have, so that if anybody is curious about getting started as a VA, which is actually how I started my business, is I started at that level as well. And it was really an amazing experience. So we'll put that in the show notes. So again, thanks, Esther, for chatting. And thank you for listening. If you heard some background noise during this conversation, we are sitting in a city in a hotel room. So hopefully it didn't bother you too much, but we're really glad that you took the time to listen today.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. Awesome. Thanks for joining us on the Christian Women Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, come and join us in our private Facebook community. We would love to get to know you better so that we can make sure the podcast is providing what you need. Plus, you can share your questions and ideas, and you'll be surrounded by incredible Christian women leaders. To join the group, visit estherlittlefield.com/group. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.